Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the end of hurricane season broadcast. I'm your host, Jim Williams. I'll be with you for a couple of hours tonight going over the main systems that hit land this year. We had 21 named storms, ironically, for the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season. So, got a lot that's going to happen tonight. I've got um, some comments about the new things at Hurricane City this year. And then I'm going to bring Bill Phillips, my co host, into the show. And we're going to talk about the 5 most impactful hurricanes of the 2021 hurricane season that hit land. And then I'm going to have a special guest here in the studio tonight. That's planned. And of course, and they're supposed to be here around 9 o'clock. So I told them to get here around 9. So give or take. And if the person doesn't show up, I'm not saying whether it's a male or female. If they don't show up, then we're just going to go on with the show. And if they do, then we'll have a lot of fun with it. And either way, I don't want anybody getting mad at me. There's no guarantees. I don't like to say something's going to happen without being for sure that it's going to happen because I don't want to have egg on my face here. So I'm not going to name any names. And then at the end of the show, I'm going to talk about next year because there's going to be some changes and some things that I want to do, some things I don't want to do. And it's a lot of it's for personal reasons, and there's a lot of stuff going on, in my life right now, and I want to talk about that late in the show. So my opening comments are Hurricane City. This has been a project that's gone on for over 20 years. 1998. I developed it in 97. You guys, most of you, the regulars, have heard this story a million times. I developed it in 97, domained it in 1998. Hurricane City's been online ever since then, and it's been. Let me see what. Let me see. Uh, I'm getting notices on my phone. I just want to make sure that apparently people are getting these notifications that we're live. Um, so the website is a work in progress. So over 20 years, it's a lot of work, and you start to get a little burnt. I mean, I've been myself and Chris Hollis over at Tropical Atlantic. We've been, you know, producing code on this site for a long time, and new products and new gadgets and new everything. I mean, Hurricane City right now is better than it's ever been. I can tell you as a fact, it's more secure. It's got more bells and whistles than it's ever had. I mean, you literally could go to that front page, open up that, well, you don't have to open anything up. The frame in the middle of the website, all those links below that frame is all real-time data. The only thing you can't get on that frame is the long range models. But what it will give you is the best performing models that are displayed automatically on the map. And then of course, all the links below it are targeted towards the current storm. So you don't really need to go anywhere else. That site is so functional right now. It's unbelievable. You can sit there and watch the live Hurricane Hunter recons flying around out there. There's maps. You can zoom in and get webcams and weather observations. You can get the buoy data. You can get the sea surface temperatures. You can get, um, did I mention the weather observations? You can get the hurricane history, all these things right below the tracking map. And then, of course, the shows pop right on that map as well. If you click the TV in the upper right hand corner, you can watch our live broadcast. We go into the storms, cover the storms. So everything at Hurricane City is just, it's better than it's ever been. And Chris Hollis has been busting his ass to put that recon data and the best performing model data and all the best track information into Hurricane City. So that's what's new going into next year. Those of you may have remembered the ham weather program at Hurricane City. It's the program that shows you the current storm, the list of all the past storms over the past 20 years plus. You get the advisory by advisory forecast positions of each storm with a map showing point by point where it went. And for some reason, ham weather, they got bought out by somebody else. They changed everything around. It's extremely expensive. And so we just decided, let's just go with the best track data from NHC. So I had to go back and change every single one of those historical drop down menus to reflect the best track data for each individual storm. But what the best track data is great for is you can click on any of those past storms over the past 20 plus years. And it'll not only give you the tracking data, but it'll give you the recon data. It'll tell you how the models performed on each storm from the past. It can even go back. In fact, I'm going to work on this, but it can even go back like 50, 75 years worth of data and how models and whatnot handled it. So it's really cool stuff that we're developing right now. And on a side note, when people load those images, like when we show the recon and that real live data, the Google Maps and all that stuff, I think Chris told me, and I don't recall if he was mentioning Ida specifically or what was going on, but anytime you exceed 28,000 views a month on those maps, they start charging you for it. So Chris had his credit card on there. They were trying to charge his credit card. All these costs start going up. And so, when you donate to Hurricane City, a lot of times I funnel that money over there to cover these costs because Chris handles a lot of the administration aspects of this. But that's just one aspect of it. So now what I've been doing is developing these new GIS maps where you can get right down you go into the database at Hurricane City and there's the 139 cities located listed there. You click on each individual city, it gives you all the hurricane statistics, the most likely time of year to be hit, the return rates, how often hurricanes come back, how often tropical storms come back, all the detailed information at the bottom, all the historical data and everything. And so when you click at the very top, it says current weather observations. When you click on that link, it takes you right down to the weather observations on the ground in those particular cities. They may be um, uh, these weather networks that are set up, like the weather flow network. It could be the Weather Underground network. It could be the data that still is active in the ham weather program we use. And then there's live streaming cams linked on there as well. All those little dots are live streaming videos, not just still images, but the streaming like live as if a storm chaser was standing there with a camera. A lot of those are live streams right from the beaches as these things are hitting. Of course, they go dead when hurricanes hit a lot of the time, but still, all those maps require maintenance. And it was a arduous task, man, to put all those 139 locations and get them down to zoomable, almost down to street level. And it's still a work in progress. There's a lot of stuff being added on those maps. Another thing we're adding for 2022, you know how you're on social media, right? And you see people sharing model maps. Like that's the big thing. Like you see, well, here's from the South Florida Water Management District map, and here's the map from, um, oh God, was it NOAA has a group of ensemble map members, and you got all the different model maps being shared all over the internet. So our model maps, I'm always thinking like, how come they're not sharing the Hurricane City model maps? And it's because it's all GIS based. So people can't just simply right click on it and save it and share it on social media. So Chris and I are working on getting something right now working on there where you can right click that image, whatever zoom level you're in, and save it and share it on social media. So that's going to be huge. People will be able to share these images all over social media, and that'll help tremendously because I've harped on this for a long time. If you don't share this stuff, nobody knows about it. Look at Levi Cowan from Tropical Tidbits. I mean, that guy, those images get shared so much on social media. It's like automatic. Um, Sharing stuff gets people going, oh, I didn't know that was there. So when you share those images, it'll have the Hurricane City logo on it. It'll have the Hurricane City domain at the bottom of it. So you'll know where it came from and how it was developed. And what we do is feature the five best performing models. We take all the models from the National Hurricane Center. There's like hundreds of them, and calculate them. And I'm going to show you some of that tonight on some of these storms that we graded the models. And it's amazing, these graphics that come out to show you how one model performed versus another on storms like Ida and Grace and, Elsa and all these hurricanes that hit land this year. But um, we take all that data and there's calculations that take place in the software that grade it from one to whatever. And what we do is I told Chris, let's get rid of all the ensembles because people don't, it's too much. Like there's hundreds of models out there and people can't differentiate one. from the others. So I told him, let's just stick with the major players. Let's stick with the GFS, the Euro. Let's stick with the Canadian and the NavGem. Well, NavGem is kind of crappy model, but the H Wharf and the H Mon model. The main ones that are at tropical tidbits, right? So people can see how those models are performing against each other, and they're graphically shown at Hurricane City. So to show 100 models on a map to me is useless because people just don't know what to make of that. I mean, they call it spaghetti and everything, but look, within the spaghetti, there's only a few models that really matter in that whole group. And if you're just going to throw crap out there, and half of them are shit models, and they don't ever pan out. So you get rid of all the garbage and just focus on the stuff that matters. It can really mean something, and that's what we're trying to gain for next year is more data driven than me sitting here explaining things because and I'll get to this later in the show, but man, if you don't have a degree in meteorology and you're some hobbyist, people just don't take you serious. So there's no point in me sitting here bloviating, night after night or day after day about what I know because apparently I know nothing, right? So that's the way it is. So anyway, next year it's all data driven, a lot less videos, and I'll get to this at the end of the show, what we're going to do and not do next year. But again, I want to put a special thanks out to Chris at Tropical Atlantic, and I want to thank all the people that continue to donate to Hurricane City because all this stuff costs money, and it's a constant money machine. It's constant software upgrades, and uh, every time here's another one, the HTTPS, right? We had to change over to secure website this year. Chris and I were debating about that for years. It just got to the point where you have to do it. I mean, nobody's going to go to a website that they can't trust, and it costs money. That costs money too. So everything had to be changed. All the images, half the images have to be changed now in order to be seen on the internet. It's a nightmare. But it takes a lot of work. And again, I run a business, and so I come and I do this on the side, and it's really a miracle that I put all this stuff online, despite the fact of lack of time and everything else to put into it. Because if I had full time to put into this, if I came out and said, okay, pay me $100,000 and I have to create all this stuff that you're going to like, I could have a heyday with it. I'd be like a kid in a candy store, like, yeah, let's get going, let's type it all up. But I mean, I got so many other things going on. This is like, but that again, that there you go. Oh, we can't trust him because he doesn't put his time into Hurricane City like the other guys do. Well, you know what? Go listen to those other guys. But I can tell you right now, 20 years, and it's not just 20 years on the internet that I've been doing this. I've been doing this since I was a kid. And I've got tapes in here. And that's another subject I wanted to touch on tonight. Is these kids that are all on social media, man. I'm so glad I didn't have a microphone 30 years ago on the internet. Like I would have said some crazy, stupid stuff. I mean, I still do today, but I mean, as a kid, you don't even have a grip on, you're just not. I mean, I used to say I'd get pissed off when a storm would turn out to sea. Like that was the 16-year-old Jim, right? And so if I had social media, that's what I would be talking about. And I kind of sense it with the young people. Like they're all pissed off and aggravated, and and constantly having to relive the past because there's nothing currently to talk about. And then there's the whole thing about the hurricane season ending abruptly this year, which is another thing Bill and I will get into a little later. But I mean, it's been a crazy year, and just a lot of stuff to talk about. So there's a lot to do tonight, a lot of things going on. So let's get right to the um, hurricanes that hit land this year. And let me bring in my co-host, Bill Phillips, from Virginia Beach. And Bill, it's been a while now. We haven't had you on air with me for a long time. You were supposed to go with me for Ida this year, and then the COVID thing kind of threw everything in the wrench in the gears.
I
So,
mean,
yep,
good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and Jim. It's always a pleasure to be with you, my friend. Good work as always. Um,
yep. Now, by the way, Bill and I talk a lot off air. It's not like this is the first time we talk, but I mean, we talk a lot on the phone. But this is the first time he's been on a show in a long time. So go ahead.
I was with you partially during Ida, but that was a little bit of a struggle, but we got it done. Um, the the yeah, we'll talk about the season coming to an abrupt halt. There could be many reasons for that. I think a lot of it needs to be studied. What do we know about Enzo? What does each individual factor that goes into um, Enzo, wind shear, sea surface temperatures? It's a stew, and if one ingredient is off, something may or may not happen. And every these subtle changes in the atmosphere, some of it's not forecastable. Some you could see the same thing. You could be given the same storm and think it's going to be given the same parameters, and the same thing may not happen twice. Because we don't know everything about hurricanes. Is my point. We're still learning. We
Yeah, and to
don't
your
know
point about
everything that
the
makes them tick. Go ahead, Jim.
sudden abruptly, what was it September 25th is the last, not just in the Atlantic Basin, but in globally that we've had a major hurricane anywhere on the globe. Like it's been dead ever since. Like so, it
Yeah,
makes me
there's
wonder.
absolutely nothing in the West Pacific. Um, there's a little system near Guam right now, but it's not even named, and that's supposedly the hottest basin in the world, and it's dead, and that's the West Pacific.
Yeah.
Um,
So
so,
everybody focuses though on Enzo, right? But I mean, do we really know if that's going to impact the worldwide basins, or are we just talking mainly the Atlantic Basin? And how do we know? And this is a big, and this maybe Enzo's a little overrated here. Maybe, and y'all know my feelings about the MJO and some of these other things. Like it's
oh, you mean mostly junk observations?
yeah, it's mostly junk observations, but there's so much unknowns that to sit there with any certainty and throw these things out there, um, it the MJO, and I can tell you about the MJO quickly because the MJO, I've seen just as many cases where we've had activity and really strong hurricanes in a negative MJO as we've had um, activity and higher than normal activity in a positive MJO. And then I've seen other times where there's been a positive MJO and we haven't had anything out there, and then there's been a negative MJO and it's exploding. So I mean, the jury is still out on that. I mean, I know we know it creates more moisture and rising air and everything, but that doesn't always translate into tropical development. If you have wind shear, it's dead. And so then that goes to the Enzo argument, right? So we all know that a warmer Enzo is going to create more wind shear, right? But now we have cool sea surface temperatures in the East Pacific, which is supposed to be more favorable. But ever since it got cold, it's been like a lockdown. So again, it's the opposite of what they're normally saying is going to be favorable, became unfavorable as soon as those temperatures started getting cold over there. So the jury's still out on this. I mean, you can't sit there with say
Could
with
it
any
be though a
certainty.
delayed response? Meaning, now that we have the parameters in place, could we see what we thought we were going to see this year translate into 22? Don't know.
I'll even ask a question on top of a question. If neutral, it seems to me, looking at all the years I've been watching this, that a neutral Enzo seems to create the highest amount of named storms or coming out of an, like a neutral situation, right? Which is what we had most of the season. Um, so is a really cool uh, Enzo going to change things? That is it going to be the op? I mean, how much more active can we possibly get? That's my point. Like, or are we going to start? Maybe we're going to learn something about that and go, oh, maybe it's a suppressing factor. Maybe there's something else we don't know that causes uh, the wind shear. That's more than just Enzo.
Well, I do know this. The two most active hurricane seasons we've had on record, 2005 and 2020, were both neutral years. Not El Nino or El La Nina. They
Right,
were neutral.
and that goes for this year, and that makes 3 years of running through the alphabet where it's not really ultra favorable conditions where you're talking La Nina, right? That's what everybody says. Oh, La Nina. Oh, you got to be scared. The lid's gonna come off. Meanwhile, we're sitting here neutral. All these years that it's been high numbers have been neutral. So, excuse me 1 minute. I got to turn my AC down a little bit. I'm sweating my ass off in here.
Jim will be right back.
But yeah, so I mean, there's a lot we don't know, but just to assume that because we got a cool Enso period here, you look at these specific temperatures, the anomalies are pretty high over there. So just to assume that it's going to be a barn burner season, we don't really know. I mean, what's happened here the last few months?
No named storm since the end of October. Nothing.
Yeah, it's alarming. It's really, and maybe with global warming too, and that's another thing. You don't really know how that's going to impact these normal predictive parameters we've been using all these years. So there's that factor.
We're sort of
All right,
having
so
to
let's
rewrite the record book on the fly.
all right, let's go ahead and get to our images here because we're going to have to be crunched for time here tonight. So let's all right, so all right, let's by the way, people can comment tonight on any of the networks. Um, if you have any comments, we will not. I'm not going to get to them right away. I might check every now and then to see if anybody's commenting, but we will put those on air. Your comments, so you can comment on YouTube, on Facebook, I believe, and on Twitter. I'm not sure about Twitter, but I know on YouTube and Facebook you can comment, and we'll put your comments on air. I might have to go back in time a little bit, so kind of hold off on your comments for now, kind of, and then until we get a little later in the show, and then I'll start reading some of your comments on air. So let's get to our images. Here is the map of the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season. And I mean, notice the map there, Bill. This year we had, the two majors out in the Atlantic recurvatures. We had the one heading into Mexico, which kind of split the uprights between um, Tampico and Veracruz. It was actually Tuxpan. It was north of Tuxpan and south of Tampico. Kind of hit a sparsely populated area. That was Hurricane. What was it, Elsa?
Grace,
I mean, yeah, Grace. I'm sorry, Grace. And then of course we had Ida. Ida was the big storm this year. I mean, Ida was all the hurricane season wrapped up into one storm. It was Ida for sure. But before I go to the next image, quickly your comments looking at that map.
I'll hit on Grace real quick. At least 8 dead, mainly from mudslides, and a family of 6 was killed um, during a mudslide when the hillside collapsed and their house was taken out.
Right, that's real mountainous terrain over there. So that actually the heavy rain, it's those Mexican systems, especially in the mainland, are so hazardous because of the mudslides and you know these hurricanes. They come in like a roar, but they quickly fall apart because of the mountains. But then the rain squeezes out and it becomes a real problem. I mean, we saw that in Hurricane Mitch back in '88, or was that
Think of like
'89?
wringing out a sponge or a towel. Those mountains squeeze every bit of moisture out of these storms, even though the winds don't last very long.
Yep,
Doesn't matter. They squeeze every bit of
yep.
moisture out.
Yeah, with Mexico, it's all about the rain and the flooding for sure. All right, so that's there's your map, and again, a lot of the recurvatures out there. Not too much in the form of Caribbean activity. The Gulf is a little quieter than last year. Last year was like a bird's nest in the Gulf of Mexico. Um, we didn't really have any coastal landfalling hurricanes on the East Coast this year, which was really odd. I mean, the west coast of Florida, for example, was pounded. Well, not pounded. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but I mean, they had all the activity on the west coast. The East Coast had nothing. I mean, what is that? 150 miles across the state? Like nothing on the East Coast at all.
I mean, I realize we had Henri in the Northeast. We'll get that in a minute. But as far as consequential storms impacting the U.S. East Coast, I think you have to go back to 2017, 2018. And I'm thinking of damn, the one that hit Morehead City.
Isaias?
What's that?
Isaias?
Isaias is one, and the one that hit Morehead City, wasn't it?
Well, we had
Yeah,
Florence.
Florence.
Yeah.
Those two are the recent ones that quote unquote went up the coast and actually did something. But other than that, it's been crickets for the East Coast.
Right. Well, Henri was a threat. Like Henri, we'll get to that one in a minute. But I mean, talk about all bark and no. Well, I can't say no bite. I mean, it did cause some damage up there with flooding and power outages and whatnot. But it wasn't as bad as it could have been with all the hype and the models and the whole. Well, the models actually did indicate it was going to weaken before landfall, but the media has other agendas.
Well, there's
I mean,
Northeast bias with the media out there. I'm sorry.
yeah, oh, they go crazy. Every time there's a system heading in the Northeast, it's Armageddon, and it could be a Cat 1,
Yeah.
It's anyway, all right, let's get on with it. So here's my map of all the systems that made landfall this year. Um, and I'd like to show this because it gives you all the cities in the database, 139 of them, and then the dark red ones are where the actual impacts were. So it was about half. I think it was 47% of all the cities in the database were impacted this year. Compared to 2020, it was like 57% with 30 named storms. So it was a little bit different amount of named storms, but more impacts in 2020 than 2021 for sure. And again, look at the conglomeration in the northern Gulf Coast. I mean, Tropical Storm Fred, Claudette, Hurricane Ida, Nicholas backed up over there and kind of dumped rain in Louisiana. So again, it was a very active year for Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, west coast of Florida got Elsa, but the big story was Ida. So let's get to the first storm that actually impacted land as a hurricane this year, and that was Hurricane Elsa. Here it was on July 2nd as a Category 1, had 85-mile-per-hour winds, went through Barbados. Speaking of Barbados, did you hear they got rid of the Queen today? They ditched her.
They ditched the. They're now technically a republic. That
Yep,
happened on Tuesday.
they have a
Ditched the queen.
president now. So
They
the
have a president.
question is now, when they get majors down there, are they going to are the Brits going to come and to the rescue, so to speak, like they normally do for British territory, or is this you're on your own situation?
They'll have help.
You think? Yeah, I mean, I would imagine if it's bad enough, they'll send some ships down there.
I mean, come on. I mean, the Brits are not heartless. They'll help.
Yeah, I guess this happened a few years ago where they wanted to get rid of the influence of the colonial influence, and they decided to have elections and let's get on with it. Let's separate ourselves from that. So we'll see how
The
that
the
plays out. But
the only thing that was really up for debate is that this was a decision that was pretty much made by the government. The only thing that I really read that was a point of contention is that some there's a lot of people that wanted that left up to a vote, like a referendum by the people, but there's really no argument. This has been discussed for years
yeah,
down there.
yeah.
Go
All
on.
right. So Elsa hit on the 2nd of July, and this was one of those. And I even listed on my blog. And by the way, I hope everybody people on my mailing list got mailed that blog, and I did release it on social media. But 786 roofs got destroyed or heavily damaged by Elsa. I mean, it doesn't take a major hurricane to do this kind of damage, especially if your structure is not real sound. So it did quite a bit of damage in Barbados, and I think St. Vincent got labeled as a hit as well. And then I think St. Lucia was considered a brush. But this was early, and everybody was thinking, uh-oh, here we go. We're off to the races. And it really didn't pan out that way. All right, let's get to our next image. Here's the wind swath of Elsa. Notice how tiny that is. That little red strip is the hurricane force wind field from the National Hurricane Center. And again, Barbados got clipped. On the west side of the island is where the hurricane force wind field was, and then again St. Martin, St. Lucia, St. Vincent rather, St. Lucia, and then the orange area were tropical storm force winds, which were all included in the database. You had Martinique and Dominica and the
And
Grenadines
remember,
down there.
Elsa was another one of these storms. We didn't even know it was a hurricane until it hit Barbados and measured the winds at the airport itself.
Yeah, that's right. I remember it was they had it as a tropical storm, and then the reports started coming in. Oh, we got a hurricane on our hands.
Yeah, I
All right,
kind
so
of.
here's what really cemented the data is the NOAA 2 aircraft was out there, and they measured 84-mile-per-hour winds right at landfall, 993 millibars, and that made it an official a hurricane when it hit the Barbados and St. Vincent areas. So here are the models on this. Let me zoom this in a little bit, and here you go. Now I got to say the GFS model was the best model this year by far. That's the AVNO you see at the top there. So the way this works is this is our best track data system at Hurricane City that grades all the models, and what we have is a color coded system. When you go to that page, and I'm not going to do it tonight because it's too extensive to teach people how to go there and do it, but when you go into the best track data page on that particular storm, you can choose the heat maps, which allow you to see the red. Red is bad and green is good. That it's been handling it well, it's in the green, and if it's handling it bad, it's in the red. To simplify it, right? So see how the AVN at the top, the GFS, it started out kind of bad in the purple pink area here, and then as time goes by, it gets better until the final landfall of Elsa, and it showed it's better than the UK metal model, which was second place. The H Wharf was third place. The HMON was fourth place. The Euro didn't do that well on this one, fifth place. The Canadian was sixth place, and the NavGem usually isn't that great, and that's down at the bottom. So that's the models on that particular storm. All right, next. All right, this is Henri. Now, this was the big tease, I like to call it, of the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season. I mean, it was all indications we're going to have a hurricane in the Northeast. It's going to hit Long Island. It's going to hit Rhode Island. It's going to hit, Massachusetts and, Connecticut and blah, 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 blah. But it really didn't. It just came in. And I know there were storm chasers up there. I talked to Tony Bright. He went up there. Mark Sudduth went up there. And they were out there in eastern Long Island, and they really just didn't get very much out there. I mean, he kind of told me I was a waste of time. On hindsight, I probably would have never went up there. I know Josh Morgan didn't bother to go get this one. A lot of chasers just don't do the Northeast for this particular reason because they can weaken in those cooler sea surface temperatures up there. And it ended up hitting as a tropical storm. Did cause power outages. A lot of trees came down because of the flooding. So not to minimize it, but it could have been a lot worse. So that was on August 22nd. Um, Here is now this the reason I'm showing you this map is this is from the HurTrack program, and this is the wind field, the size of the wind field at landfall. When it finally made landfall, it came in between Rhode Island and Connecticut, right on the border there, as a 65. I mean, about a 60-mile-per-hour system. Actually says 52 there. It's probably 55, 60 at landfall. But I've had people question, well, I live up in Boston and we didn't get any tropical storm force winds. Well, this is the actual post tropical positioning of the wind field. As it moved inland, it bobbled around a little bit, and then the wind field did reach up into Boston, Cape Cod, Providence. All these areas were impacted by tropical storm force winds. So that is counted as a impact from a tropical storm in the Hurricane City database. All right, here's the Henri intensity models because we also grade the intensity of these models, right? So of each hurricane. So Henri, the intensity models are important because this is one where you didn't really worry about the track as much. That was pretty much cemented there, but the intensity was of a lot of debate about how strong it was going to come into the Northeast. So there's the UK model. It handled it the best. It started out terrible in the red here, and then as time went by, the UK Met got better and better with the intensity of this. It was only off by 16 knots, 17 knots at the end. Over its entire journey, it was off by an average of 17. The HMON was second. That's the tropical model. And the HMON and the HWRF are the tropical models that usually over exaggerate the winds. But the last few years, they've done a really good job tweaking those models. And they've gotten really good at predicting the intensities of these tropical systems, much better than they did in the past. So that came in second place. The GFS was third place. And the HWRF was fourth place. The other models, and while I have this graphic up, let me mention the Euro and not the Euro, the H. Oh gosh, not the H, the Icon model. The Icon model is a intensity model only. It's not for tracking. I know there's one that's tracked on the Tropical Tidbits website, but that's a different Icon model. It's not the same one that does the intensity. That usually handles the intensity pretty well, but even that one didn't do very well. And some of these models, the global models, do not. There's no grades on the intensity on some of those, so they don't get listed here. It's kind of hit and miss on intensity for the grading of the models. All right, next was Ida. This was the big storm of the year. Bill, this was the one. This was the granddaddy of all of them for the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season. Started down in the Caribbean and impacted the Caymans as a tropical storm, and then it moved into the Isle of Youth, became a hurricane. Western Cuba impacted Havana, and I don't think Cabo Corrientes got impacted. That's that little thing that
No.
looks like a mouth out here on the western tip of Cuba. Cabo Corrientes escaped the wind field. Then it got out into the Gulf Stream here, the loop current in the Gulf of Mexico, and it just exploded. I decided to head on up. Bill was going to come with me, but had a bout with COVID, a scare rather, not an actual COVID infection, and decided to lay back for this one. But I went up there for this, and it ended up hitting as a Category 4 hurricane in Grand Isle, Louisiana. And we're going to show you some video here shortly of the intense winds that were battering the southeast Louisiana coastline as this came in. But it came in with 929 millibars, 160 knots wind gusts. That's 185-mile-an-hour wind gusts. But the sustained winds were around 150 based on the recon. And then it kind of made a turn a little sooner than I kind of anticipated and went north towards New Orleans, went towards western Lake Pontchartrain up there, and caused a whole bunch of damage and power outages. And it was just horrific for the people up there. Get to the next image on this. Here's the wind swath of Hurricane Ida. And again, down in the Caribbean, kind of skinny in its development stages. A real skinny wind field of hurricane force winds for the Isle of Youth, Isle of Pines, whatever the heck you want to call it. I still go back and forth on whatever that's.
Isle of Youth.
Yeah, I mean they just go back and forth. Isle of Pines, Isle of Youth, Isle of Pines. Just name it something and leave it. Just like uh, Cabo Verde, Cape Verde, Cabo Verde. Just pick something already. It's
Pick
been
something in
Cape
the
Verde
middle.
since the beginning of time, and all of a sudden it's Cabo. But anyway, then it went over the western, just west of Havana there, in the province of Cuba that I'm trying to remember. Barahona, not Barahona. That's in Dominican Republic.
Baracoa, Camagüey.
Whatever. It's irrelevant.
Yeah.
Anybody that's living there, I doubt they're listening to this, but they'd be like, yeah, just brush us off like we don't even exist. Who cares? But no, I mean, I can't remember the name of that place. It's really lush, tropical, amazingly beautiful place in western Cuba there. But anyway, it went into the Gulf, strengthened, and it expanded its wind field, and there you see it coming into the wind field did impact the Plaquemines Parish over here, and it devastated Grand Isle, and it went over towards the Homa area, and went north in areas like well, New Orleans, obviously, Western New Orleans rather, and you got Raceland got impacted, and uh, well, I'll show you those images in just a minute. But and then of
Golden
course
Meadow got obliterated.
Golden Meadow, and there's a bunch of places that really got hit hard down there. All right, so here's the landfall size of Hurricane Ida. So inside the red circle, the donut is where those really intense winds are, the ones that knock buildings down. That's in the donut. The skinny red line are hurricane force sustained winds. So again, that's over to Plaquemines, all the way up towards uh, over towards Homa, and then the aqua circle are hurricane gust up to hurricane force, mainly sustained tropical storm force winds in the aqua circle, and that extended over towards where I was located in Morgan City, and then the yellow circle goes all the way over to towards Intracoastal City. Didn't quite get there, and Abbeville and places like that. That's tropical storm force gusts all up in that area. And of course, this moved north. So I think I have that image next. Nope. That. All right. So here's the damage from Golden Meadow, and it's extreme. Now this is northwest of Grand Isle. If you follow the road from Grand Isle north out of town, it goes through Golden Meadow. Now, this is a road that I was on to set the remote camera up in Homa. I just didn't drive far enough south towards Golden Meadow. In hindsight, I probably could have done that. I could have got that camera down there. I just wasn't really paying attention if the road was connected, and I just didn't want to get into a situation where it was going to be so completely underwater I'd never be able to go and get the camera back. So I kind of, that whole storm surge forecast really threw me for a loop, and it's a learning experience, and I'll learn from on the next one that I'm not going to let that stop me. But the damage is extensive. I mean, look at these houses; they're all obliterated here, right in the center of this image. I mean, this is from the Google Earth post imagery of Golden Meadow, and it's just every single building, every structure has roof damage, shingles missing, plywood in some cases, whole roof failures. Um, some of the mobile homes kind of held up okay, which is really amazing. Some of these newer built mobile homes are pretty robust, and I'll get to that in a minute as well. Here's another town called Leeville. Now, this is a little further south from Golden Meadow. I believe, yeah, it's a little bit further south, I believe. And notice the extreme damage along the waterfront here. I mean, just obliterated homes. There's warehouses in here, roofs torn off. This looks like maybe some kind of a little airport or something. I don't know. It's just complete devastation. I mean, this is what you see for Cat 5s. I mean, generally it's that kind of damage, extreme damage. So um, then it went due north from there, turned north and missed Morgan City. The western eye wall was over Homa, and it plowed through places like Raceland and uh, excuse me, the western Lake Pontchartrain area. And by the way, when I drove out of the area and I drove through all the devastated areas, and I got some video of that. But as I got into New Orleans, uh, the damage got lesser as you got toward the city of New Orleans, but the power was out everywhere. The data was out. You couldn't get on the internet. You couldn't do anything. It was like complete communication knockdown. I mean, Ida gave it the constantly left hooked and right hooked everything on the coast. Then it left hooked everything as it went inland, and then the right hook came around. It just wiped out the entire infrastructure of communications. I was down. I couldn't live stream anymore. Communications, no phone calls, no texting. I mean, it was bad. It was complete blackout situation. And then, of course, it went up north of Lake Pontchartrain. It still caused a lot of damage up even in there. And power outages were huge. I mean, down here, and it's a funny thing because when I was driving through in the aftermath, and I was down in Homa, going to retrieve the camera, people were running out of their houses, and they saw my truck, and they were like, well, they thought, I'm with the power crew. And they would run up, and I'd put the window down, and they were like, how long is it going to be for us to get our power back? And I just looked at this guy and said, I'm thinking a few weeks. I mean, and it turned out I was probably wrong on that. I think it was a little longer for those hardest hit areas. They might have been with a month without power, maybe even longer. So I hope that guy's not cursing me, thinking, well, he was kind of downplaying it. But I've seen them get the power restored pretty quickly in some of these aftermaths. So I was kind of giving them a little optimism on how quick the power was going to get restored. But you can see over here in the Plaquemines, it wasn't that bad. But in those areas where that core came in, you can see it just devastated the power grid. And this was, I mean, we're talking, let me see something here. Yeah, that was on the 29th, and we're talking 2 weeks later. This is 2 weeks later that we're looking at still 80,000 plus outages. So
Yeah, this went on for about a month.
it was really, really bad in southeast Louisiana. So this is the big uh, argument that was going on the internet over Ida, and it's a Cat 5. Now, I understand the, to quote Tom Cruise, the need for speed.
Stop it.
Speed being the acceleration of the wind. But the fact of the matter is, these measurements that, these people that are reporting winds of 170 miles an hour on land and everything, these were elevated instrument readings, and they weren't at the surface. The standard measuring wind for measuring wind is 33 feet. And a lot of these instruments were 50, 60, 70 feet up in the air on top of these boats and stuff. And you can't really say, okay, well, that was the wind gust. And plus, you got to have I think it's it's a 10-second measured wind. It's not, can't just be for 1/10 of a second or something. It's got to be sustained. So I don't know that they're going to upgrade this, but there was a lot of belly aching on the internet. But here's the recon. I mean, it's clearly showing this was the last fix right before landfall, and it's showing 931 millibars, 148.5 miles per hour. That's flight level. Surface winds 131.2 miles per hour at uh, the recon at landfall. That's the recon. That's out over the open water. So I mean, I don't know. I don't buy the Cat 5 designation. But then again, I said that after what was one of the other ones? Well, Michael,
Michael?
I said that, and there was Laura. Well, Laura ended up being right. It did not get upgraded to a Cat 5. But the people were yelling Cat 5, Cat 5. That's what winds like that do. 120, 130 mile an hour winds will blow your roof off your house. You don't need Cat 5 to do that. And that
Aren't we just
damages.
talking about, at some point, you're just talking semantics when you get 130, 140, 150. I mean,
True, but
truthful.
from a science standpoint, though, you like to be accurate in that. You like to say, okay, this definitely was a Cat 4, or this definitely was a Cat 5 for historical reference. You can't just
But if your
blend them
house,
all together.
but my point is, if your house is wiped away, you don't care if it was 130 or 150. Your house is gone.
Well, exactly. But again, when you go back and look at, people actually thought when Wilma hit here in South Florida, it hit here category 2, borderline cat 3, right? And I had neighbors and friends coming out and go, that was a cat 4. Like, no, it wasn't. I mean, they just, because they lost pieces of the roof or whatever, they just assume it was higher than what it had. You see it with tornadoes all the time. They'll say, oh, it was definitely a tornado, when in reality, it's straight line winds. And we have this argument all the time. People, they go through a traumatic experience, and they're right away. There should be scientific, like psychological books written about this. People that automatically assume it was worse than what the scientists said because their roof got torn off their house.
No, let me give you a more practical example. I'm not going to go into it too much, but I had a relative of mine who thought she knew hurricanes, went through one last year, Sally, and now she's petrified of them. This is a woman that had dealt with brushes for 30 years up where I am in Virginia Beach. It's a hell of a lot different when you get hit smacked on, when you get hit dead on from a cat 2 borderline 3 versus the brushes that you get up here.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, and let that be a lesson to people from up north. When you move to the south, you move down to the hurricane zone, and you think it's like a nor'easter or one of these winter storms that you experience. Like you, Bill, you said your friends that helped you out there for a while. They're moving to Florida, right? So
Right.
they're scoping out these areas to live. And I was telling Bill, maybe they should avoid South Florida because if they're the kind of people that are going to be wigged out over a hurricane, they're not going to like it when they get a major hurricane smacking them, or in the panhandle, because that's a high risk area for majors, right? So if you're going to
Mm-hmm.
move to Florida, you might want to think North Florida, the mainland peninsula, maybe Tampa over to Jacksonville are your safer bets. You get into these tropical zones like South Florida and the Florida Panhandle, and when I say panhandle, I'm not referring to tropical. I'm just saying it's the water temperatures in the Gulf are so you know ripe for major hurricanes. By the time they get into that northern Gulf, man, they can just tear up the area. I mean, we saw that with Michael, and you know,
The way I explain the Gulf to people, it's not a matter of water temperature. Unless it's late or very early in the season, then it matters. And I'm talking very late. Like November, December, late November like this, the water temperature matters because it might save you from a category. Or June, it might save you from a category because the water's not warm yet. But when you get to the heart of the season, with the Gulf, it's all a matter of upper level support. The fuel is there. It's all a question of the remainder of the remainder of the ingredients of the stew that go into making a hurricane, whether it strengthens or weakens. The fuel is there in the Gulf at all times almost.
yeah, late in the season, look at Opal. I mean, and Kate, and I mean, Kate was in November, went up there to hit as a cat too. So I mean, Uh, I just people that move down, just be aware, and this is why I make the database, because people can learn about city versus city. Like you're moving to Florida, you can go through all those cities and see like, oh, this one gets hit more than that one. And this one, wow, this one really gets hit a lot. You can learn what areas get hit more than others. And that's the database is educational. And if people just take the time to go look at it before they go and spend a $500,000 on a house, and then realize, okay, after the first hurricane kicks their ass, now I got to put a bunch of money into this house, and or do I even want to stay here for the next one? So I mean, it's just about education, about getting educated. Same thing goes for the entire northern Gulf. I mean, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas. If you're going to move to these areas, I mean, you just have a general understanding of the hurricane history of it, because when you're there, you're stuck. And a lot of these people buy a house, they can't bail on it. And that's another thing. The hurricane hits you, it's major, it wrecks the house. It's not like you can just walk away from it.
You still
You're
own the
married to
land.
that
You still owe
house.
the mortgage.
Yeah, you still owe the mortgage. You still got to fix the house. You got to, you have insurance if you have a mortgage, and they're gonna want you to fix that house and stay there. You can't just walk away from it. I mean,
Lesson here is know your risks. If you live in California, you deal with earthquakes and wildfires. If you live in the Midwest, you deal with tornadoes. If you live in the far northern parts of the country, it's going to snow in the wintertime, and you better be have your house heated to deal with the cold and the snow. That's it. Know your area's risks is the point of this part of the conversation.
yeah, I agree with you on that. But when it comes to hurricanes, I think it's a different level. I mean, even the tornadoes in
No,
the
you
in
have
the
to. It is.
it's so hit and miss with tornadoes. Like you can't say, well, if I move this city, I'm safer than another city, because the tornadoes are. I mean, you can tell by a whole state. Like you can look at Oklahoma and say, yeah, you don't really want to live in Oklahoma if you're afraid of tornadoes. Or but Texas is more spread out. There's certain areas of Texas that hardly get any tornadoes, so it's different. But when it comes to the state of Florida, there's a distinct difference between North and South Florida. Like you got to learn about that. But
Well, there's
winter storms, I mean, for God's sake, if you're north of 40 north or whatever, you're going to have to deal with snow in any given hurricane season. I mean, it just goes with the territory. I mean, unless you're living in, I don't know, Ethiopia or something, and you've moved to the United States for the first time. I mean, everybody knows you're going to have to deal with snow. But when it comes to hurricanes, there's such a big difference between one area and the next of the hurricane history of it that you really got to educate yourself on it.
Yeah.
All right, so here were the final models on Ida, and then I'm going to show you some quick video of what I took when I was there. But here, believe it or not, the Canadian was the best performing model on Ida, and that's something a lot of people probably don't know because they're so used to looking at the Euro and the GFS and the H Wharf. But the Canadian got this one. I mean, normally you don't see that with the Canadian. Usually it's maybe third, fourth place, fifth place, something like that. But the Canadian did really well. It started out a little hairy in the beginning, and then it got better as time went by. The colors got greener and greener, so it really did well. I mean, the Canadian nailed Ida. The GFS did well on Ida. The European did okay. The HMON did okay. The H Wharf kind of tailed off a little bit. The NavGem and the UK Met were terrible on Ida, but that Canadian every now and then, it'll hit on one.
What's the
Can't
nickname
complete.
for the Canadian though? Most of the time, constantly making cyclones.
Well, that was back, a few years back. They've really adjusted that model.
Yeah, I have.
That's the Canadian model, and they've really adjusted it a lot. They've gotten rid of whatever the input was that was creating all these renegade, tropical cyclones all over the place on the model runs, and they really curved that back. You don't see that anymore with the Canadian. Very rarely. The only thing the Canadian I noticed this year with the Canadian model is it was constantly underdoing the intensities on these storms. Like every single storm, it had it as like a category less than the other hurricane models. So the models doing the hurricane runs, I mean, the Canadian was just weaker than all the others all year long. I don't know what's up with that, but that's what I noticed about While I have this graphic up, let me just go through my opinions on each model real quick. Like Canadian was weaker than, it seemed like it was weaker than all the other models all year long. The GFS to me had the best season it's had in a long time. The European model, I don't know what happened this year. It like fell off a cliff. It hit on a couple of storms, but it really wasn't that great this year. The tropical models, the HMON and the HWRF, really did good on intensities, and they've continued to do good on intensities. But on the tracks, they're a little they're not as good as the European or the GFS or the UK Met model. They're just not on track. They're really good on intensity, but not on track. The NavGem is just continues to be terrible. I don't know what's up with that NavGem. It's just never. The UK Met model is like my second favorite model, even though it did terrible on Ida. It usually does really well, especially in Caribbean and Atlantic systems. The UK Met model has always been impressive to me. It lays an egg every now and then, like it did on Ida, but that's the model that I'm kind of growing fond of as the years go by. We'll have to see how it performs coming up here in the future. By the way, NHC competes against these models. They have their own NHC output, and they do better than most of these models most of the time. So NHC does a really good job on a 5-day of their own ideas of where something's going to be in 5-day. Their 5-day forecast tracks are really good, and many times they're better than these models. Occasionally one of these models will get them, but they usually end up better than the models. So keep that in mind when you're looking at an NHC forecast track. All right, are we okay? Let's go back and let me stop sharing this and let me get to some video from my Hurricane Ida experience, and let's get that going. Bill, you can talk while I'm pulling this up.
You people, I think, it's the one area that I wish people could get a better appreciation of how much work and energy goes into one of these chase opportunities to produce this for the site and how much work that Jim puts into this. I mean, I'm behind the scenes working with him. It is so hard. I mean, even I got spoiled the last couple of years until Ida, but you know, it's there's so many takeaways and learning opportunities that I take from Ida that will make it easier going forward, for the years that we do this. And each storm is different. Each storm has its challenges, but that's why we do this. That's what makes it fun.
Right.
If it was easy, everybody would do it.
Right. Okay.
I mean, I look at you're in Morehead City. God, Morgan City. I knew I was going to do that once. Morgan City, and you got a wind gust to 70 miles an hour, and you really weren't in that corner at all where you were sitting.
Right. Yeah, I was outside of the wind field and I had a gust of 70 and we were not even under the CDO of that hurricane, which is amazing. Now, Bill, before we get started, can you see and hear? Oh, hold on.
There's nothing going
Can
on.
you see and hear that?
Some rain and some
You're fine. Go ahead.
see, my high gust has.
Okay,
Audio's
so
good. Go ahead.
all right, so I just paused it. So I'm going to start with here were some really interesting winds of the remote cam that I set up in Homa. And while I have this image up, it's a good thing I stopped it here. So that circle right near the eye is the remote cam location. What I did is I mounted it on a wooden pole, aiming towards some mobile homes that was directly across the heliport, which is in southeastern Homa. And my location as the hurricane was hitting was over here in Morgan City. So we were monitoring the remote cam, and I was in Morgan City. And the reason I was not in Homa or any of these other locations is because the storm surge was expected to be covering everything. That's the way the NHC worded it. Everything was going to be underwater all the way across the board, so I didn't want to take a chance on that. So I stayed back, and it turned out to be a mistake. But the remote cam was there. So let's forward here to 6 minutes and 30 seconds, and let's go ahead and roll this. I had the split cam up. I'm in Morgan City on the right, and we had the scanner audio going at the local emergency. But watch what happens here. You start seeing that roof coming apart.
No, there's a bunch of roof that just blew off.
It gets a little hung up on the data here. It has some specs. Fits and starts. Okay, then we fast forward to 8:30. This is where the anemometer begins to blow up. Notice the black box in the middle of the screen. That's where the digital readout is supposed to be, and the wind blew that off. And I beat the crap out of that before I left the house just to make sure it would stay where it needed to, and the wind took it anyway. That shows you how strong that wind was. Watch what happens here. And that beeping noise, I get rid of that.
Tragic, but I think we're going to lose that anemometer, I think.
Yeah, that was Bill talking during the broadcast. He was with me on this.
Yeah, that really is annoying.
That alarm gets eliminated after a little while. I figure out how to do that.
We'll never hear that alarm again. We disabled that.
Two big trees are pulling down on power lines. Issues caution going down through there.
Okay, next one is, let's skip over to 102. Okay, here we go. All right, let's roll it. This is where the pole, I think, blows down. You see it tilted over at this point. This is, again, my location in Morgan City. And then watch what happens here when I switch over to remote cam.
Quarter 6 range, pick up there, kids.
Any second now, I'll be switching over.
11 headquarters, you can show me 97 and forward.
Okay, right at 102.14 is when it switches over.
Wow, I'm not sure where this is. Let me see.
Oh, these were, yeah, here's some wind shots from people that around Homa.
That's incredible.
Okay, then we go to 104. Here we go. There's a visible shot of the mesovortices inside the eye of Hurricane Ida.
There's some mesovortices.
Amazing. See them spinning in there?
Wow. That's incredible.
Little spoke wheels rotating
That was
around.
right after it came on shore.
Crazy.
Okay, and then we go to 110.
Let's see what this is.
This is what, watch this. This is an amazing storm chaser out there that caught a roof blowing off a house here. Here it goes. Here it goes. Watch.
Oh, that roof is coming. Holy shit.
Gone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just decapitated that power line. All right, so let's go to the next video, which is let's see, 76. Yeah, here it is, the original video. And let me.
Okay, everyone, welcome to our beginning of our Hurricane Ida.
This is the way it started. I was in the hotel room.
Morgan City, Louisiana. Jim Williams now.
All right. Get right to the good stuff here. About 20 minutes in. Here we go.
The system was so perfectly vertically stacked that even up at 30,000 feet, there was no tilt to the eye at all. It was just perfectly stacked. And there were mesovortices circling around there. You can see them in that close-up if you, I don't know if you can zoom in on this. No, I can't. But you notice little mesovortices inside the eye itself spinning around in there. Incredible. With the lightning and everything, that is just absolutely incredible around the eye wall before it made landfall. This is Grand Isle. No sound.
Okay, let me go back. 836. Now this is.
You're staying. Emergency crews cannot get to you.
This is the Arlo like we do. This is in Grand Isle. Complete devastation. Notice everything is pretty much wiped out. All right, then we fast forward to 3738. 3738. Here we go. This is my aftermath video driving around. This is tough. Watch how hard it is, because remember, I have a rack on top of that truck, so I have to navigate under all these down power lines. Look at this. Look at how low that's hanging. Really hazardous driving in the aftermath of these hurricanes. All right, and then 3840. 38.
Over the road anymore that are like.
I'm going to show you a couple mast arms here that were bent.
Gas
These
station
are
got
supposed to withstand
annihilated.
140 mile per hour
See how these
winds.
mast arms got bent? They're not even over the road anymore. They're like sideways. They got twisted. New station here. Wow, look at the damage down there.
This is on the way to go get my remote cam, which is further to the
My
south.
cam is down there. I got to go get it. A lot of power poles down.
Is our guest
Good
here
grief,
yet?
Look
No?
at this.
All right. Not yet. All right.
This might have
Begin
been
to wonder if
where
they're gonna
my
show up
camera
at
was
all.
attached to this line of poles. I'll have to see when I get up there.
Look at how hazardous it is driving around all this stuff. It's like a war zone. And then, of course, 41 minutes in. This is where the camera was located. See these mobile home parks on the left over here? That's where the camera was located. And notice the airport to the right.
Wow, it looks like the pole. Yeah, there it is. The pole got completely snapped. Or
Pole is
pulled
on the
back.
left side of the street, by the way.
Let me show you this.
See, there it is, right on
There's
that pole.
The camera with the anemometer hanging on the pole. They're halfway up, leaning back.
Notice how those mobile homes held up relatively well, considering the amount of winds that was beating on them. 42 to 42.30. Let me look at this. And then we'll get to the other storms. 42. And I drove through a town called Des Alamans. I'm probably butchering that name, but
Stuff destroyed over
look
there.
at this damage here. It's incredible.
Power poles down. This whole roof is gone. More power lines in the road.
Okay. So that's it, basically, in a nutshell. The videos that that I shot in Homa. I went down to well, let's see. I got into areas. I got into let's see. I got into Raceland, Thibodeau. I was able to get up into Metairie, La Place, and then I shot across over to New Orleans, and that's when I lost all data communication. But It was really, the video is quite extensive, and I don't have the time to waste here tonight showing you every bit of it, but that's in the video archive page at Hurricane City, and the entire video is about 45 minutes long. There's other videos that I shot prior to that show all the raw video of me driving around. So there's a lot of interesting video in there. But anyway, there's 183 days of hurricane season, right? So this is how I keep track. Bill, I don't know if you know this. This is how I'm able to tell you what time of the year a hurricane will hit a particular area on average. Because what I do is assign each day of the hurricane season a number. So June 1st would be number one, obviously, and November 30th would be day 183. So each hurricane that is known to have hit a particular area on a certain date is assigned that a number. For example, if it's Andrew, it's the 24th day of August, which I don't have that number memorized in my head, but it would be like, day 90 or whatever, for example. And or 97 or something. And so you take all those numbers and add them up and then divide it by the amount of hurricanes, and it gives you the exact day that city it tends to be hit by a hurricane. It's just based on all the hurricane hits going back over 150 years and then calculating it to show you what is the most likely day of the year for that city to be hit by a hurricane.
Andrew would
So-
be 84, for example. I just did the math.
Yeah, probably, yeah. So that's pretty good. You did that in your head?
Yes.
That's good. Yeah, well, it was August 24th, so it's 30, 60.
There are 90 days.
Yeah, 84. You're right. Yeah,
30,
84.
60, 90. I might be off by a day, but it's like 84, 85.
Yeah. So, those are all for hurricane hits, but if you take each city, there's a different height of the hurricane season. So I like to do that to kind of get an idea. People ask me that all the time. I'm going on a vacation. What's the best time to go to Jamaica? What's the best time to go to, the Caymans or the Bahamas or something? And so they can go in the database and see the most likely time to be hit by a hurricane. It's a pretty cool stat. All right. So anyway, let's get on with our named storms. We didn't finish at Ida. So let me make sure I have the images queued here. Okay, so there we were on the models on Ida. And again, the Canadian won on the track, and the GFS was second place, Euro third place. All right, so the next system that was a big impact of the hurricane season was Hurricane Larry. This was your typical recurvature system heading up into the Canadian Maritimes, hit with 80 mile per hour winds, rather, gusting to nearly 100 mile an hour winds in Newfoundland and in St. Pierre, Newfoundland. They were belted by this thing on September 11th, which is 3 days after my birthday, incidentally. So, Bill, what are your thoughts on Larry, quickly?
Larry was quite a remarkable storm. Not only did it give 100 mile per hour wind gusts to Newfoundland, it also, as a post-tropical system, dumped, and even for Greenland, this is remarkable for September, it dumped 3 feet of snow as a post-tropical system merging with a front. And
Wow.
still produced 100 mile an hour wind gusts up there.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I remember this was quite a threat to Bermuda, but it kind of just hung off to the right there, and it just, the models were flip-flopping left and right of Bermuda, and eventually it made up its mind to go into the right. Spared them. But, the Canadian Maritimes up there, Newfoundland, really got blasted pretty good by this. They've had it kind of rough the past several years. They've had quite a few systems go through there, either there or Nova Scotia. So,
I'm going to make a prediction about Bermuda in my lifetime. I think the strongest system they've had is a legit Cat 3 several. go on that island. With global warming and the warming sea surface temperatures, it's only a matter of time before they would have had a 140, 130, 140, 145 mile per hour storm through there. It's bound to happen, and I almost guarantee that
Yeah.
in my lifetime it's coming. Larry could have been the one. It just wobbled a little bit to the east.
And I'll go even further. I think it could be near a Cat 5, and you could have a major up there in the Canadian Maritimes.
Yeah, think of. Let's go one step further. 1938
Greenland.
Hurricane Express. Take a storm like that with our sea surface temperatures the way they are now, and I think you could add a category, probably as bad as that was. You could probably add a category to those intensities in our modern times. So
I agree.
It's things are changing, folks, and just because you live. People think, oh, I live in the Mid-Atlantic. I'm in the Northeast. I'm immune. No, you're not.
And here's another interesting statistic. In the database, there's been more hits further north over the past dozen years or so than there has been in the south. In other words, areas that already really don't get hit that frequently are getting hit less frequently, like the ABC Islands, the southern windwards. I know Nicaragua's had a couple of hard hits lately, but up until then, they were really kind of quiet. Are they here? No, not yet. I say they. It could be an individual. I'm tipping my hat here. The Honduras really hasn't had it bad active, but at least the Caymans. I've talked about how quiet the Caymans have been. Jamaica, but yet the areas further north, like the northeastern United States, Bermuda, the Canadian Maritimes, are getting more hits and they're getting stronger. So that's an indication that we have warmer sea surface temperatures further north, allowing these things to get further north and hit land. So there's that.
Well, Jamaica could have gotten hit. They had a weak storm kind of go over the island, but it was not very well put together. They could have easily had a more impactful storm with what they had the atmospherics been right, but it just wasn't.
Right.
But the Caymans are a real surprise to me. That used to be, for years, that was number one next to Cape Hatteras. That used to be right up there at the top. Not so much now.
Yeah, I'm just surprised. It's been like these long swaths of many years put together where they're not getting anything. And it's just perplexing. And that, I mean, when you think about it, Cuba really hasn't been hit all that much either lately. And, South Florida, with the exception of Irma, has been kind of quiet as well. So, but the Bahamas, I mean, we had Dorian in the Bahamas. There's been some other doozies coming through there, Matthew, etc.
Dorian could have very easily been South Florida. You're lucky.
Yeah.
Very lucky.
Yep.
100 miles is all that was. Maybe 90. I have to go back and look. It's 90, 100.
So next up on the list was Nicholas. And, what's unusual about this, and I mean, I'm not here to say that Texas can't get hit, at the height of the season or late in the season, because, I mean, after all, the 1900 Galveston hurricane hit on September 8th, right? So they do have a rich hurricane history of September systems, but when you get into late September and October, the chances drop dramatically for Texas, and they increase for Florida. But here we were, September 14th. Nicholas came from the Caribbean, crossed over Mexico, got into the Bay of Campeche, redeveloped, it became a hurricane, and came very close to southern Texas and stayed offshore of Kennedy County, Brownsville, Corpus Christi. Then it came in Port O'Connor Texas, just north of there is Freeport, and hit as a Category 1. And it was a really powerful little system. I mean, it wasn't that well organized. It was kind of one of those half systems, like you and I like to talk about
That
the
look.
bat look, where the southern half is void of convection and it's all on the north or northeast quad. And there it came into Freeport and really did a number on them over there. It hit as a 75-mile-an-hour hurricane, gusting to 92 miles per hour. And then it drifted around into Houston, Galveston area, and then went over towards Port Arthur and drifted into Louisiana, where it dumped more rainfall and created more problems for them in Louisiana. But Nicholas was a kind of a, in hindsight now, was a late season storm, even though it's right around the height of the season. Little did we know things were going to come to a screeching halt soon after. I didn't think it would. I mean, I was expecting a late season storm. I know you were too.
Yeah,
All right,
I
so
was
here's
I was expecting a late season storm. The last several Octobers, pardon my language, but we always talk about this all the time. The October motherfucker really didn't have that this year for the
all right. Now
U.S.
your aunt's gonna wash your mouth out with soap.
The hell with it.
You just had to let it out, didn't you?
I did.
Ah,
I did. Uh,
brought to you by Fresca.
only once. Move on.
All right, so
Move on.
here's the wind swath from the National Hurricane Center on Nicholas, and again, tropical storm in yellow and hurricane in red, just north of Port O'Connor into Freeport. Kind of a fat little hurricane force wind field there, so they did get walloped pretty good there. And then, of course, it weakened before it got towards Galveston and Houston down to tropical storm force. And then, of course, there were a lot of power outages. Here we are. This is the 15th, and it hit on the 14th. So a day later, we were looking at over 100,000, 120,000 people without power in Texas. And then, of course, the bulk of that was where the core came in, as it always is. 60% of the area without power, roughly. And not so bad for the Houston, Galveston area. They got power restored relatively quickly. Compared to Ida, it was like day and night as far as getting power restored.
But that's the difference from Ida wiped out portions of the infrastructure. A Cat 1 is not going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You might have to put up some poles, replace a couple things here and there within the network, but it's relatively quick. A 1 or a 2 is not going to do that. You get into the major category, it's a different animal.
Right. All right, so here's the models on Nicholas. The H-Wharf did the best on Nicholas. Started out a little bit warm here, and then it got better as time went on. Same thing with the GFS. It got better as time went on. It was only a little bit difference between the GFS and the H-Wharf. The Canadian did okay on it. The European did okay. The UK Met, average, not that great. NavGem, okay. H-Bond, they all did okay on this one. But of course, you got a caged line in the Gulf of Mexico. It's hard to be that far off, really. But I mean, the H-Wharf nailed this one. But overall, like I said, there's the GFS number 2, and this is on track again. But the GFS just really had a good year this year. GFS was the top of all the models in every single storm that mattered, and so that's
But
the
wasn't
deal. I
Nicholas
mean,
one of these close-in, rapid developers, which changes the calculus on some of the models, and by that I mean it takes some of the models time to take out the garbage, and they don't have the time to do that when storms develop quickly.
right. Well, yeah, and the other thing is the European model. That model does not even start to run models, the calculations on the grading until like 48 hours in. because it doesn't do invest. It doesn't do, until it becomes a named storm, the euro doesn't get graded. So it's always a 2 days behind the other models. So the euro is only good, if you have a 5 day sampling, like to really use the euro. That's the way the system works. Chris and I have talked about it. There's nothing you can do about it. It's the way the data is released, and they only do it on named storms. They don't do it for invest on the European model. So, with that said, again, we're expecting a guest here any minute in the studio, and I hear nothing yet. No banging doors or anything like that. So maybe they're not here yet. All right, so I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. This was from Josh Morgan's show back in a few weeks ago, and he did like we did tonight, talking about all the storms and where he chased and everything, and he had Reed Timmer on as a special guest on the right there. And Reed and him were kind of shooting the bull back and forth a little bit there, and really learned a lot about the inside scoop on chasing. Like, a lot of stuff that they talked about was, inside baseball, like you like to say, right, Bill? Like stuff that people don't normally get to hear about, all the problems, running out of gas, buying into a certain model run and getting screwed and not making it there in time. Reed had that problem in Michael. He was stuck in Panama City. He never made it into Hurricane Michael's eye or anything, and he still loses sleep over that. But
project only making a certain amount of money, looking at the bigger picture and not necessarily your financials.
Yeah, and that's something he talked about, the money of when he was doing that Storm Chaser series, about how he kind of got screwed over on the money aspect of that a little bit, and really didn't make as much as he thought. So anyway, that's going to be our guest tonight, is Reed Timmer. He was supposed to be here. I don't know. He's here in Florida. Okay, so he's supposed to be here, and any minute. I told him to show up late because I had a lot of stuff to talk about, and I didn't want to, bore him with all this, individual storm talk. So, I thought it would be kind of cool to have him here, and I reached out to him, and he got back with me, and he's like, I'm not really planning on being down that way. And then something changed where he was going to be down here for a short period of time. So, hold on a minute. They just got here. I say they, it's him. All right, hold on a minute. So, all right, let me get off this screen sharing here. Get back on the cam shot. Let me get rid of this. So, wait for them to come in here. Hello? You coming? Oh, God. Who the hell are you? Where's Reed at? Oh, boy. This isn't what I was expecting. No. Oh, my God. Oh, man. So, ladies and gentlemen, what's your name? Weed trimmer?
Whoa. Oh, God, shut up. You're a moron. You're a moron.
Weed trimmer, ladies and gentlemen. Weed trimmer. So I got some questions for Weed tonight. First of all, you look a lot thinner than you do in the videos. Let me get him in here so we can see him. So, let me ask you something. I'm not seeing them on. I'm gonna have to go full screen on this, Bill, because there's not enough room in here.
Go ahead.
Let me minimize your thing here. Wait, hold on a minute. I'll come back to you in a minute. All right, so I'm going to ask questions tonight of Weed Trimmer because he's got a lot of insight in this business, and since Reed is not going to be here, Weed will tell me about the chase industry with some insight of all his years of storm chasing. So, first of all, how do you drive a car with no arms and legs? That's what I want to know. Oh, by the way, he doesn't. He's kind of, he talks very low and he mumbles a lot. So I'm gonna have to lean in to get these answers. So, uh huh. So the question was, how do you get into a car and drive it with no arms and legs? He says, I wind it up. That's how I do it. Um, let's think of some other questions here. All right, here's one. Why are you so good at this? Because he's an expert on things that spin. All right. By the way, if anybody has any questions for Weed Trimmer, Bill, you know what? Hold on a minute, because I gotta step out for just 1 second. Bill, I'm gonna put you back on camera here. I'm gonna go grab something real quick, and I'll be right back. Okay. I'm going to put you back here. Hold on 1 second.
All right, Jim will be right back. We these gimmicksy pools are nothing short of he's crazy. Let us know what you think in the chat. And you never know what that man's gonna do. So I'm a little stunned. So we'll go from there and see what other bit he's got up his sleeve.
All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. Anything happened while I was gone?
No, what'd you have to do? Let the dog out?
No, I had to go grab another beer.
Kidding.
It's gonna be a long night. When Reed Trimmer doesn't show up, it's a long night. Do you have any questions for Weed Trimmer here, Bill?
How do we how are you good at what makes you how are you good at filtering out the BS in the what makes you so skilled at filtering out the BS that's in some of the storm chasing industry?
Okay, let me ask him this. You heard that, right? Yeah. He says you have to weed it out.
Come on. I thought we'd do better than that. Come on. Come on.
All right, here's a good question. How do you wind down when you're like you're hyped up, you're out there chasing the storms, you're all wound up and everything. How do you take a load off, when you get back? Mhm. He says he does smoke weeds.
Well, I'm sure he does a lot of grass.
right. All right. Here's one. Here's
That's enough. Get rid of it. That's enough.
I know you're gonna want to kick my ass when you see me, aren't you? All right. So here's one. Um, this is all inquiring minds want to know the answer to this question. Now, I watched the Storm Chasers series for years, right? I want to know, and you had Ginger Z on the show with you like 10 years ago, and you and her seemed like you were getting a little chummy there. Did you guys did you do it or anything? Did you? Uh huh. Yeah. I don't know if I can say that on air. He says he got some trim. Oh man. All right. Let's see what else. Any other questions? Let me go to the comments real quick here, and I got again, Bill, if you want to chime in with any. Uh, okay, there's a whole bunch of. Let me see chat. Okay. Let's see. Hi everyone. Ouch. LOL. We do love Weed Delicious jokes. All right. So, anybody out there that has a question for Weed Trimmer, let me know. I know there's some people that are awfully pissed off because they thought there was going to be Reed Timmer or somebody like famous in the studio here, and this is what we got. So, um, here's another question. Bill, and again, let me know. Raise your hand or whatever if you have any comments. But let me see here. Um, so you're so famous. You must have sponsors, right? Yes, idiot. Ryobi. These jokes aren't going over very well. Oh God. So here's another one. You seem like you yell a lot. Like, what's up with that? You're always yelling. "Ah, ah, ah." Why do you yell so much? Have you ever heard of a quiet weed trimmer? Bill, any comment? Any questions?
Bring me back in.
All
Um.
right.
All right. Let's bring this show back. Let's bring this show back on the rails and try and wrap this up.
I got a couple more questions for Reed Timmer, man. Come on.
You're nuts.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Here's one. Why did you stop the Storm Chaser series? What made them stop that Storm Chaser series? It was so good. I've seen all the episodes on Quest and everything. Like, would they stop it when it's so successful? Mm. All right. He said he wasn't cutting it.
Oh, stop it.
Um.
He-
Here's one. You have no stomach. Um. Don't you get a lot like hungry when you're out there chasing and whatnot? Uh. Never mind that question. It's a stupid question. Have you ever farted when you're out there chasing with somebody else in the vehicle? That's something everybody wants to know.
Come on, man.
Uh huh. All right. Uh, answer is no, because yes, I have gas and I have had gas, and it was a problem until I switched to battery. What do you do when you're not chasing? He just hangs around. All right. What do you mean? Bill doesn't. He don't have any more questions. All right. All right.
Thank you for the nice little gimmick there. That I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, don't run out so fast. Well, he's never going to come back here again. Oh well. Bye.
Bye now.
That's what you get for not coming on my show. Well, we learned a lot. But anyway, no, seriously, you know, thinking about this, I mean, this has been, I got to honestly, this season from like June, actually the entire hurricane season, on a personal level, and it's I just got a little silly tonight, but I mean, it's been stressful, and things going on in my personal life that I just don't really want to discuss here tonight. But I mean, I may or may not be sitting right here next year, doing this. I don't know. This might be the last show. For weed trimmer's sake, I hope it's not. But it's been a long haul doing this. I think we're going to probably just do the chasing next year. We're going to do coverage of hurricanes making landfall like we've always done. I just, and Bill, I got to get you in a storm. That's definitely going to happen. But
We've given away 2 opportunities due to COVID. That eventually that's going to stop. You would think.
I don't know. We got Rumacom now. Rumacon.
It's a matter of you and I both. I mean, I'll be 40 next year. I'm not a spring chicken anymore. You're older than I am, but it's amazing how long I've known you now. We're both not spring chickens anymore. We've got to do it.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, when it comes to especially the majors, I'm going, and that's it. And and by the way, that's never been an issue for me. The only thing that stopped me from doing that is my business, and that's gonna probably stop. I mean, if I have to forfeit, I will. If it means I'm missing an Ida or a Laura. That's not happening anymore. And as far as you going with me to handle the technical, the
I'll do
radio and the scanner and all that kind of stuff while you're there. I mean, to do it, yeah, to do it through this platform is we have 2 different platforms we're working with, and I don't really want to discuss the specifics of them, but they really require us to be together when we're doing these things. It's doing it remotely like this is almost. It's hard, and it's not, and Bill's been with me for so long. I think it's about time he gets into a storm and we cover it that way. And of course, if you can't, we'll still do it, try to do it this way. But,
well,
you saw it with Ida. It was,
I mean, I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag too much, but all I'm going to say is, and I'm not going to make any promises because of the limitations that we're still working with. But there have been things in the works this year and going into next year that just know I'm working on something. You know what that is. We've talked about it privately. I just didn't get the opportunity this year. It just stopped.
Yeah.
It just stopped. I mean, some of my adaptive equipment that I built for the built for the chair and for me to go out and try to do this stuff is actually, I'm not going to put it up on camera, but it's sitting on this table.
Yeah.
I just never got the opportunity. I'm and that's pretty much that's what made this year hard for me to see it come to a screeching halt, because I think I was as prepared as I could have ever been to go out and try and do this, and to never get the opportunity to get off the bench sucks. But what do we say next year? And there's still a lot of things that I take away from this season watching you do it, and there's some trial runs that I did not get to do because of COVID that hopefully I'll get to do going into next year.
Yeah, you could see an impact on the entire industry when you think about it. A lot of chasers had to either cancel or had alternate plans. I know. Look at Josh Morganman, for example. I mean, he had to cancel a whole bunch of his chases because of COVID.
He can't go
It's
into certain countries because he's an American. They're not, and not just because he's an American. They're not letting foreigners into a lot of these countries.
yeah,
Can't do
yep,
it. Still can't. And with Omicron now, he was talking about being able to go to Australia, being able to do this. I don't think he's going to be able to do a lot of that now with Omicron. Unfortunately, it's sad.
yeah. I think this is going to go on all through 2022, at least until the summer, because that's when it comes back to the south. Is in the summertime. It seems like it has a cycle where the COVID goes north in the winter, and then it comes south in the summertime. And Florida's been hit hard twice in the height of the summer, in the spring going into the summer. So
You're hit
you know,
hard because your whole population is so transient. You don't get
yep,
a break. You got the snowbirds that come down from the north, plus your regular people that live there year round. So you're
right,
just bringing it from all sides.
yep. International travel. It's an international travel hub. They got people coming up from all the countries coming into South Florida, and then they come from here and they go to everywhere else and spread it, and then they come back again, and then it spreads again, and it's just, But look,
Jim,
back
if you
to
want to
Hurricane
edit
City
this out
though.
what I'm about to say, please do. But ladies and gentlemen, go get your shot. Don't be a part of the problem. Be a part of the
Yeah.
solution.
Well, I mean, I sat there with this on my face for quite a while uh, on my Facebook page, which it doesn't even stick to my face anymore. But there was a reason for that. And I've had people say, well, it's political, or uh, you know, uh, the reason I wore that X on my face on that Facebook page is because for several reasons. I didn't want to get into the whole prediction stuff anymore. Telling people where I thought a storm was going to go, and then have a busted forecast, and have them go, "Oh, see, you screwed it up," and then the politics got so ugly at times that and I have a very patient level with people that you know have differing political views. I mean, you and I, we have
He's
different
very
political
tolerant.
views, and,
Him
and
is
you know
very
we
tolerant. I'll put it
but
that
we
way. We've had our
and
issues, but
we
he's
can still
actually very
talk.
tolerant. Go on.
Well, we talk like adults to each other for the most part. I mean, we have our share of arguments, but
Yeah.
I mean, when it comes to Facebook, you can sometimes say something one line and it can set somebody into a rage. And it's like, especially with the COVID, and I had that COVID-19 thing wrapped around my logo on Facebook too, which pissed people off. Everything is getting everybody pissed off. So I'm kind of like, I put the tape on my mouth, like, I'm done. I'm not saying shit anymore. If you can't handle it, be an adult about it and say, okay, well, you have your opinion, I have my opinion, but we do have the hurricanes in common, right? And if you're going to take my liberal views and say, well, I don't want to follow you anymore, your hurricane stuff, because of that, then that's on you. You miss out on the stats and all the other stuff that I do. That's on you. You're hurting yourself by doing that. So um, it's been a powder keg. Social media has been, and I touched on that earlier about uh, why I'm glad I didn't have social media when I was a teenager, because I was a completely different mindset back then. I mean, my God, I've got tapes down here that I'm crying like a baby because something turned out to see, and I sense that there's people out there that are like that on social media, and they're showing 10-day models all the time. I don't do that. So when somebody says to me, uh, just stick to the weather, or this is why I don't listen to you, and one woman showed the X over my mouth and said, this is what you represent, this is why you need to keep your mouth shut. That wasn't about politics as much as it's about, I'm kind of done with the predictions. I've had it. I mean, I can't do any more than I've done in the predictive business of hurricanes. And
Him as your
it's
friend, I'm
just,
going to speak out now publicly. I'm not going to say anything you don't want me to say. You know you can trust me.
all right, go.
20. You've done that. You started these predictions in 2003, if I'm not mistaken. 2003 was your first year.
Hmm.
You only missed 2 of those years were bad. That's it. The track record speaks for itself. End of story. It doesn't matter that he doesn't have a degree. Doesn't matter that he doesn't have a PhD behind his name. He's earned street cred, if you want to use that term, because of the track record. All you have to do is go look at that predictions page and go back and look at that. Those predictions are done in May. There are forecasters with PhDs, I'm not going to name them, who revise their forecasts 3 times a year. He does it once. It's not a forecast, but he releases his predictions once. And then that's it. And he can't get any traction. There's something wrong with the whole industry. And I don't blame him for getting out. All right, I'm done.
All right. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I said 20 to 24 name storms. We had 21. All my locations, about 80% of my cities got impacted this year that I predicted. I didn't hit Ida. That's the big one. That's all everybody thinks about is the big one. If you don't hit the big one, you didn't hit anything. And you're not paying attention to this.
For a
The way
lot of
the
years, though,
process
he did
works.
videos and he did blogs and he's done these predictions. And he put a disclaimer on each one that says there will always be an area that gets hit outside of my top 20. And this year is Ida.
Well,
It happens.
you know what it is when you're labeled as a hobbyist, nobody respects you. So it is what it is. So look, man, we'll do the chasing stuff. We'll cover the majors when they hit, and that's it. Not killing myself over it anymore.
No, those days are good.
Apologize for the silliness tonight. I'm just trying to let off some steam, and
No,
it is
God.
what it is.
Have at
But
it.
and it was a terrible job, by the way. But we'll let that go and never revisit anything like that. Although I was thinking about doing the Oscar the Grouch thing next year, if I were to do it, because that's perfect for my mindset. Like coming out bitching and griping and complaining and all that. You pop out of a garbage can with a green face and everything. And I thought,
Oh.
you know what? Then that's the other thing. People don't have any sense of humor in this business, man. I can see so many people, like when I'm on Twitter or Facebook, I'll try to, especially my responses to people, I try to be a little lighthearted about it or joke around. And some of these people have no sense of humor, dude. None.
Jim, that's the
Like
problem
you're just.
That's the problem with society now. You can't. Everybody wants to run to their corner. If you don't agree with them, if you don't agree with their way of thinking, they almost want nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
And if that mindset doesn't change, ladies and gentlemen, this country as we know it's done in the next 5 or 10 years. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. And let me also say, for those of you that think I just sit around and don't try to, promote what I do, although I got to say, when it comes to the media, I really have never, the only thing I've ever promoted since I've been with Hurricane City is I sent an email to 60 Minutes because I really thought that, they could do a story because it was after the 2020 season, right? And I thought, this is a year that they're going to want to talk about landfalls and predictions and everything. And my predictions are really good. And I thought, I have a system for figuring out where they're going to go before the season starts and who's going to get impacted and blah, blah, blah. And then compare it to the NHC, the NOAA, that just comes out with a general amount of named storms that ranges from like 7 to 15. And then say it's going to be active, and here's what we think the ACE is going to be, which means nothing to anybody. And I figured maybe they would pick up the story and do a story about guys that do predictions like me, and then the professionals, and say, why aren't you talking more about where these things are going to go if he has figured out a way to figure out where they're going to go, and maybe make a story out of it. But all the other media that's been at Hurricane City was all people that came to me. I never went to anybody and tried to throw myself at the cameras and say, can you look at me? Can you? And, and what really bothers me, and I actually, that's not true. Other than 60 Minutes, there was one time I did fill out a form to do a workshop at one of the hurricane conferences, and they asked, it was the
Remember
Florida
that.
Hurricane Conference, and I said, they asked it, would anybody like to do any speaking presentations? So I wrote up this whole thing and said I'd like to do a speaking presentation, and they flat out rejected it. So ever since that day, I just never bothered with it ever again. Like I'm just, and we have that tropical weather conference in Texas. I wouldn't mind going to that, but you know what it is? You're going to go there, and it's going to be a bunch of guys that are, uh, let's just say that they've had great success in promoting their products, and they're going to be out there promoting all their shit, and I'm going to go sit in the back of the room and keep my mouth shut. I'm not into it. It's not what I'm in this for. So
But you would
as much as I'd like to go, I just feel like I'd just be a distraction. Like
you would think somebody in the industry though would want to further with and combined your skill that you've developed with their PhD in street cred and PhD degree, whatever you want to use. You think somebody would want to enhance that, but yet it's crickets.
I think the biggest problem is that they don't understand the concept of going city by city by city, and I think that's the biggest hang up with a lot of professionals. Like, well, the hurricane doesn't hit a city. We know this. It hits a whole county. It hits a whole state. We get it. But
They don't
there's a
want to
point
set
of
the illusion that it's a point on a map. I think they're all
exactly.
that.
But the fact of the matter is, an eye is only 10 miles wide on average. Maybe 20 miles, some at 30 miles. Some of them do get up to 40 miles, but that's still like the size of a city. So, I mean, an eye makes landfall in a city. The eye wall might impact an entire county, right? And the whole envelope of the hurricane might infect an entire state, but it still makes landfall somewhere at a particular point. And the more you get down to street level and figure out city by city, the more data that becomes available, and you can figure out going down a street. That's with any data set. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's COVID or astronomy or whatever. The more you zoom in on something, the more you learn about it. And that's what I've done with the hurricane stuff. And it's just, they stick their finger in the air. Blah, 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 I don't want to hear about it.
See, but
And I
if you
think
give
that's
me,
where it's
if you
at.
tell me, let's take 2005 for example. You had a 60-mile stretch or so of that Gulf Coast that just screamed, it's going to get its ass kicked. It's going to get its ass kicked. It's going to get its ass kicked. And it did. Meanwhile, you have some of these other guys that come out with forecasts, call it predictions, whatever you want, and they have these county-based setups where the odds of getting hit are 1%, 2%, 1%, 5%. What are you supposed to do with that?
Yeah. Well, Phil Cott's back. I mean, even though he does mention, the county by county method, he buries it so far down in his forecast that he makes it irrelevant. Just by doing that in and of itself, he makes where they're going to go irrelevant. And all he focuses on is the ACE and the environmental variables such as ENSO and, the North Atlantic Oscillation and things like that to try to say, okay, well, we expect 70% for this 1,000-mile stretch of coastline and 30% for this 1,000-mile stretch of coastline. And then you got these other guys out there that are doing these big bubbles on a map. They're drawing these gigantic circles that cover an entire state and then saying, I hit it, when in reality, you drew a big circle on a map. That's not
Let's
hitting
give
anything.
you an example. I'm sure 1992 was quiet as a whole for the hurricane season. One problem with that. Andrew. Okay? The ACE probably wasn't that high for that particular year. Does the ACE really matter? No.
That's probably really low. And there was a low number. I think
really
it was
low.
7.
I inverted it. I meant to say low. Thank you.
Yeah, 7 named storms, I think, that year. And and by the way, we haven't had that many slow years where I can really use my methodology to prove that I'm right, even in the slow years. But then, and then there's the people that are out there like, well, if you throw buckshot, you're going to get more hits. And that's another argument. Like, oh, yeah, 30 storms there, you're going to get that many hits. When in reality, like take this year, the majority of my hits took place early in the season before, before Ida and all the other ones came along. Like the majority of my hits and tracks happened early. So if you ended the season with just a 2-month stretch, I would have been right. Um, and then of course we had the influx of systems into the Gulf, which kind of threw the numbers off. But you know what? I could sit here complaining all day long. It's pointless. It's pointless,
It
dude.
is.
It just comes across as whiny, and what are you gonna do? What are you just gonna? Am I gonna keep torturing myself year after year with this? No.
No.
So it's time to just chase, and we'll cover things from the road. And if a major hurricane in the Caribbean, perhaps,
Success,
you
dude.
know,
It was as close to as a walk off as you can get. You're walking off. Have your head held high with what you've done.
yeah.
And
All
that's
right, man. So let's wrap it up.
one
I
more thing
again,
before we get out of here. Please look at the site, donate. We don't, all the money that you donate goes back into Hurricane City. We don't sit here and pay our cable bills, our phone bills, our rent, none of that. It all goes back into the product. So help us out. Please donate. And with Jim, I'll talk. And with that, I'll toss it back to you, Jim, and I'll see you in June.
yeah, very good point. Yeah, all the money goes back into Hurricane City and the development phases of everything. There's nothing used for paying FPL, the car payment, the giving me money so I can buy a vehicle and all that kind of crap. It goes right back into the product itself, and that's it. So, Bill, thanks for the help this year. I know we didn't really get you going this year, and this
It
kind of
was
a
dead. And then we have you. Mama said there would be years like this.
yeah. All right, that's a good one. All right, let's wrap it up. We'll probably not see you on June 1st like we normally do. So
No,
we'll
I meant. Well, no, but I shouldn't have said that. But meaning, we'll be back on watch come June, and if we need to be out covering a storm, we'll be around.
Yep. All right. Well, again, thank you for the people that do donate and share this stuff. I know after this last show with the weed trimmer, you're probably not going to want to share that, but you know what? It's having a little fun. It's blowing off some steam, so whatever. Um, all right, Bill. Again, thanks, and we'll keep in touch during the off season. I know that. And by the way, if anybody has any personal emails they want to send, I mean, I respond to everybody. I don't ever ignore anybody. You hit me up on social media with a question, I'll answer it. If you dispute me on something, I'd rather have somebody dispute me than just ignore what I'm doing. I mean, I'd rather have that. So, you know what? Reach out to me, email me, social media. I'll update the database during the season and the rankings and all that stuff, but there won't be any more, shows and predictions and all that kind of stuff. So we'll still be cranking and getting the data out there for everybody. So with that said, it is 10:07 p.m. Eastern time. Sorry I didn't have the real Reed Timmer in the studio here. Bill, thank you again, and we'll catch you sometime next year.
Yes, sir. I'll be around, and when hurricanes threaten, we'll be. Well, I should put it this way, really. When majors threaten, we'll be around.
That's perfectly said. All right. Good night, everyone.
All right.